Hello and welcome to SourceCAD. In this video, Scott Onstott will show you the step-by-step method of making smart title block in AutoCAD complete with attributes and fields. Now this title block will automatically pull information from your drawing and it will populate it in the respective fields. Not just that, it has graphic scale and other dynamic blocks that you can adjust automatically based on your drawing settings. So with that, let's get started.
Today I'm going to show you how to design a smart title block in AutoCAD. I'm using AutoCAD Architecture 2025 for this, but you can use any version of AutoCAD going back many years, at least a decade, to do this project. And if you're using an AutoCAD vertical or program in the AutoCAD toolbox, just launch that in the base or vanilla AutoCAD version. And there's a shortcut that comes with your software that allows you to launch in the base AutoCAD. And that's what I've done here. You can see my Home tab is not showing the architectural toolset. It's just showing the regular AutoCAD draw tools. And this is visible in the drafting and annotation workspace, which is what I'm in here. I've opened up the title block in model space drawing, which I'm supplying here. And this is just the geometry of the title block. And it has some text labels for these different areas. But right now, these are separate polyline objects or text objects. And everything here is drawn in real-world scale. This is set up to be an architectural D-size sheet, which is used in North America. It's 24 by 36 inches. And you can adapt this to your own needs by stretching it. So if you wanted to stretch this, you can stretch the title block and make it wider or narrower. You can stretch it the other direction and make it shorter or taller, however you need to be the sheet size that you want. And if I were to measure this, I'll use the distance command. I'm going to measure the width of this border. It measures 34.5 units. The full piece of paper would be 36 inches wide. And so this border is designed to be smaller than the piece of paper, of course. And I've put in these point objects right here and another one in the opposite corner, which represent the actual full width and height of the piece of paper. So this is the basic sort of dumb title block that we have here. And I wanted to also kind of point out that the way that we're getting the thickness of these borders is not by using line weights. We're using polyline thickness. So let me show you that. I'll go to the View tab and open the Properties palette. And then I'm going to click on this line right here. And you can see it's a polyline. And the global width is set here at 0.05. And that is what is giving it this thickness here. This smaller line here is 0.025. So it's half the width. And that is a good way of ensuring that your borders are always thick. It doesn't rely on line weights, which can be misconfigured with plot styles. And this is probably the most sure way of getting your borders to always plot in a thick condition is by using thickened polylines. So it's kind of an old school feature that I'm using here to do this. I've put the SourceCAD logo up here, but you would replace that with your own logo. I've left an area for general notes. There's a revision block here. And then down below we have some boxes for the firm name and address, the project name and address, and then some other details like the project number, the date, the scale, and the sheet number. But right now this is just a simple drawing, and we're going to add intelligence to this by designing attributes that are going to go in these boxes, and then we'll be able to include those in a block definition that will really give this the smarts that we're looking for.
Okay, so before we move further into the video, I'd like to give you a completely free AutoCAD Essentials course for beginners. If you are new to AutoCAD and you want to learn it in a step-by-step way, all for free, along with the certificate of completion, then this is the course for you. Now you can sign up for this course on SourceCAD. It is completely free, and once you finish the course 100%, you'll also receive a certificate of completion. So click the link in the description of this video and also in the pinned comment to sign up for this free AutoCAD Essentials course, and then continue the video here.
Now I'm ready to begin designing attribute definitions. And these are data structures that are going to store the information that we enter into the title block. So there's a bit of setup that's required when you're designing a smart title block, and it comes down to designing these attributes. So to do that, we're going to go to the Home tab and go to the Block panel and open up the shelf and use this tool right here, Define Attributes. And every attribute has to have a tag and a prompt, and optionally it can have a default value. The tag is like the programming name, and it has to be in uppercase. So this first piece of information I want to collect is the firm name and address. So the tag is going to be all caps firm underscore name underscore ADDR. The prompt is meant to be a human readable prompt that describes what this is all about. And so I can just type in firm name and address. The default can either be a single line or multiple lines depending on whether this flag is checked. In this case, multiple lines make sense because I want to put in the name and the address up here. So I'm going to click this button here, and it's like we're drawing in M text or multi-line text. And I'll click the point right here, and then I can resize this text box to fill the available space. And I'll put in some information in here that will act as the default. I'll say it's 123 Main Street. Actually, let's put the firm name before that. I'll say it's called Acme Co. and the city and the zip code on the next line. Fine. Okay. And there it is. All that information is stored in there now. I want to leave the insertion point where I specified already, so I'm going to leave this unchecked. And you can see that there are very specific values in here based on where I clicked when I use this tool here. The text height you can specify here, and the boundary width is how wide that box was. So I'm just going to leave all of that as it is and say OK. And so there it is. I'm just seeing the tag name here. And this thing that I've just created is technically called an attribute definition. It is the structure that holds this information. It's sort of like a variable. We've designed this variable to add intelligence to our title block. And let's continue. I'd like to make another one just down below here. And to save time and effort, I can simply copy the attribute definition that I've already made and place it down below. Now, I don't want to have two attributes with the same tag name, so I'm going to change this one. I'll select it, and I can come over here and change it. So this is the project name and address. And I'll change the prompt as well. Project name and address. Okay. Another way that you can edit an attribute definition is by double-clicking on it. And then you can just edit this information in this smaller dialog box. Okay, moving on. I have some one-liners here that I want to make. Project number. So I'll create a new attribute definition, and I'll call it projnum, and I'll give it a more descriptive name here. And I don't want to use multiple lines in this case, and the default is going to be whatever my firm's naming convention is for project numbers. I'm going to say that it's the year dot and then another number after another dot. Now, the way that you name your projects is going to be probably different, so just use whatever naming convention you like here. And I'm going to make this a little smaller. I'm going to say it's 0.20. And I'm going to specify the location of this on screen, and I'll say OK. And then I can click right up here to place that. Now, it jumped down. I'm going to move it up again. Maybe it had the wrong justification. Let's see. Justify is top left. No, it is correct. But sometimes this happens. I'll just move it up. Great. Then I'm going to copy this down below and double click on it this time and just change the tag name here to be date, and the prompt will be date. And I'm going to change the way that that default is to be like this, like month, year, or month, date, and year. And then scale, I'll copy this again and double click on it and call this one scale. And I'll give it a default of as noted. Sometimes you can have a scale on the title block like this, which would apply to all of the drawings on the sheet. But more commonly, the individual drawings on the sheet will have their own scale, and this will just say as noted. And then over here, we need a sheet number. I'm going to also, before I put that in, I'm going to change my units. I'll type in UN, and change my units to architectural so that I can use feet and inches. And then I'm going to create a new attribute definition. And this will have a tag of sheet num. And the prompt will be sheet number. And the default will be A101, let's say. And I want to justify this middle center. And I want this to be bigger. Let's say it's 1/4 inch. And okay. And I'm going to click a point right in the middle of this box. And the tag number overflows the available space, but that's fine because ultimately these tag names that we see in the attribute definitions are going to be replaced by the values that we put in. So values would be like the default. This is a default value. We're not able to preview that in the attribute definition. Bear with me, we're going to see that appear with the actual sheet number eventually. But we've completed our steps here of adding attribute definitions to the various boxes in the title block. Now that we have a title block which includes attribute definitions, it's time to convert all of this information into a single block. And that block will contain attributes. Sometimes it's called an attributed block. But at this stage, we're not there yet. We're in the kind of prototyping stage where we've designed these attributes as variables that will hold information. But to get them to actually hold any information, we have to convert all of this stuff into a block. So we need to make a block. I'm going to type in bmake for block make, and I'll give this a name of title block arch D, which is technically the size of my title block. The most important thing is to select the objects in your title block by clicking this button right here. And the order in which you select the attribute definitions is significant. So I'm going to carefully select these attribute definitions one at a time in the order that I want them to appear in the block. And I believe that's all of them. And now I just need to zoom out and make a crossing window and select all of the geometry comprising this title block. And then I'll press enter, and it says 51 objects selected. And there's even a thumbnail up here that shows the title block. I'm going to choose to convert this to a block, and I'm going to use inches as my block unit. And then OK. Now it's a block, and we're seeing the Edit Attributes dialog box. And we're seeing all of the defaults here. So I can edit this. Let's say I'm going to change the date to be today's date. And I'm going to change the sheet number to A103, let's say, just for sake of being different. And I'll click here and change what this address says. I'll say it's 333 Main Street. Okay. And then OK. And you can see that those changes were made. We have a different sheet number. We have a different date. We have a different address. And if we want to revisit that, I can type in ATE, which stands for Attribute Edit, and click anywhere on the title block, and I'm brought right back into the Edit Attributes dialog box where I can enter this information. Do you see how there's a bunch of blank boxes down here, and then there's previous and next? This allows you to have many, many attributes in your title block and have multiple pages of them if necessary. So you can enter all this data and say OK. And so this title block is now a block reference that contains attributes down here. These are the attributes, and I can also edit them here. So if I wanted to change the project number, I can click here, and let's say this is now 24.06.99, enter, and that updates this information over here. So there's multiple ways of editing this. Another way you can edit it is by double-clicking on the title block. And this brings up a different command, the Enhanced Attribute Editor. And yet you can edit the information just like you can in the other places. I can change the value down here. Let's say this is a different date. I'll say apply, OK, and you can see the date was updated. So there's many different ways to accomplish this by editing the attributes, whether you double click or whether you say ATE, you get a different interface. Or you can just click on the title block and edit the information in the properties palette. They're all equally valid. Now let's say that I want to redesign a little bit of this. Like this sheet number is too small for my liking. I'd like to boost that up and make it bigger. Well, I can select the title block, and then right click and choose Block Editor. And I'm in the Block Editor environment here, which includes the block authoring palettes. I don't need to see those. I can turn those off. Down here, I'm going to select this particular attribute definition, and I'm going to increase the size of that by changing the height value here. Let's say it's 3/8. That makes it bigger. I'll close the block editor and save. But nothing seems to have updated here. The change that I make only applies to future instances of that block, future block references. So if I were to go over here and insert, I'll type I enter for insert, and here's the title block right here. I can right click on it and say insert, and I'll place this one adjacent. We're prompted. We can edit the data. I'll say okay. And notice over here that the number is bigger, but on my original block, this is a block reference. On my original block reference, the number remains smaller. There is a way to get this to update, and that's using this command right up here called synchronize attributes, or @sync. And down here on the command line, it says you can select by name or select interactively. I'll choose select and I'll click on the block, and then I'll say yes to edit this block, and it synchronizes the block with the block definition, thereby increasing the size of this one attribute. And so this is a way that you can update older blocks with newly designed attribute information by using @sync. Okay, so now we have a fully functioning smart title block. This is not the end of the project though, because we typically don't want to see our title blocks in model space. Title blocks are best used on layout tabs in Paperspace. And we have two layouts that come with this template, and neither of them are very useful. This one has a viewport, and this other one has a viewport also with other settings. But what I'd like to do is actually delete these. I'm going to right click on layout 2 and say delete. And you can't delete this one, but if you try, it will just recreate a new layout one that has a simple viewport, and that's it. So I'm actually going to erase that viewport for now and start from scratch. So here on layout 1, I'm going to right click and go to the page setup manager. And in the page setup manager, you can see that there's only one current page setup called layout 1, but there are no others. And I can create a new page setup here, which I'm going to call Arch D. Actually, I'll call it Arch D Extended, which is technically what this is going to be. And I'm going to choose a plotter driver of AutoCAD PDF general documentation. The paper size is Arch D Expand 36 by 24 right here. I want to plot the layout at 1:1. I'll use a plot style table of AIA standard.ctb, and I want to display that plot style in the layout by checking this box. I'll say OK, and then I'll set this as the current layout and close. And so this has redefined the paper size here to be exactly 24 inches high and 36 inches wide. Extended means that this plottable area border has been extended from its default position, which is inboard quite a bit. Okay, so now I have essentially an empty canvas to place my title block on. I can go over to the blocks palette, which you can open by pressing I enter, and right click and insert our smart title block right over here. And unfortunately, there's no way to snap in Paperspace to the edge of the paper. So I recommend that you just zoom way in and try to get the crosshairs to appear right on that corner and click. And then we're prompted to enter the attribute values. I'll just accept everything and say OK. And then double click the mouse wheel to zoom extents. And you can see now that we have our smart title block in our layout. And the borders of this title block are just inside of the plottable area, which is shown with a dashed line all around. And that is shown with this little dot down here, which is that point that I included in the geometry. So that if this ever gets moved over, you can use this point to place it right in the corner of your paper, and then everything should line up. Okay, so now I have a smart title block here, and if I want to edit it, I can click on the block, I can edit the attributes in the properties palette, or I could type ATE, enter, and edit the information in this dialog box, or I could just double click on it to get the enhanced attribute editor here. The advantage of the enhanced attribute editor is you can take an attribute and you have some additional options here where you can change all of these different properties if you like. I don't really need to make any changes though. There is another thing I would like to add to this particular layout is a viewport. And if you look up here in my layer list, I only have two layers, layer 0 and the title block layer. So I'm going to open up layer properties and I'll right click on one of these headers and choose maximize all columns so that I can read it. And then in here, I'm going to create a new layer, which I'll call viewport. I'll set that current, and then I'll make a viewport by typing mview, and I'll click a couple of corner points for that viewport, and it's going to show me whatever is in model space. And this is a little confusing at first because it's showing us the same title block. I'm going to go over to model space and click on this block and delete it. I don't need it here anymore. But to help me arrange things in my layout, I'm going to insert a drawing that I have supplied here from another video, the condo floor plan. I'm just going to drag and drop that in here. Click once and hit enter 3 times. So now we have this condo floor plan in model space. I'll go back to layout 1, and we're seeing part of that here in the viewport. I'll double click inside the viewport to go into model space, and then I can use this flyout menu here to set the scale. I'm going to try 1/4 inch scale. That's rather small on this particular sheet size. So I'll go up to 1/2 inch scale, and then I can drag the mouse wheel to pan. Be careful that you don't roll the mouse wheel or you'll change the zoom factor. So I'm going to set this at 1/2 inch again, and then drag over a little bit, and then I'll lock the viewport right here so that I can't inadvertently adjust the scale by rolling the mouse wheel. Now if I roll the mouse wheel, it zooms in on the whole sheet, and I've locked it in at 1/2 inch. I can now double click outside of the viewport, and I can adjust the size of the viewport if necessary by clicking on these grips and moving it around. I can also move the viewport to a new position on the sheet. And finally, to get rid of the viewport, I'll set a different layer current and turn off the viewport layer. And now I can see this here on my title block. So this is how it is supposed to work in AutoCAD, where you have your smart title block in the layout and you have the work that you're doing in model space. Another feature that is useful is to add your annotation and dimensioning in the layout. That leaves model space open for more designing. So if I wanted to add a dimension here, maybe I'll add a new layer right over here. I'll add a new layer for dimensions, and I'll give that, it doesn't really need a color here because everything that shows up in the layout appears as black, but I'll give it a color anyway and set it current. And then I can start to dimension this. And before I do that, I should take a look at my dimension style. I'm going to use an annotative style, and then I will go ahead and use the dimension tool and start to dimension this. And it's using the wrong units. I don't want decimal units here. I'm going to edit my dimension style here, and I will adjust its primary units to be architectural. And while I'm at it, I'm going to change the arrowheads to be architectural tick. There we go. So there's a dimension. Then I can add additional dimensions here. And observe that these dimensions are showing the real world scale of these walls. That's 19 feet long. That's not the scale of this sheet. Remember, this sheet is 36 inches wide, or 3 feet. And yet this dimension says 19 feet because it's reading that information off of that geometry in model space. And I can continue dimensioning here as much as I need to annotate this drawing. And back in model space, the dimensions don't exist here. They only exist in this layout, and they appear in the correct size relative to the sheet because I'm using an annotative style and it's showing these in the correct size. So all of these things come together in this project where we're bringing the model space geometry together with our smart title block, and we're adding dimensions to it here in the layout. I guess the last thing for me to do is to rename this and call it A101. And then there's some refinements that I can add here to my sheet that are blocks. They are dynamic blocks that come with AutoCAD. And we can find them by going to the Autodesk Design Center. So type ADC enter to open up your Design Center. And I've navigated down here to C, Program Files, Autodesk, Current Version, Sample, English US, Dynamic Blocks, and I'm looking at the Annotation Imperial Drawing, Sample Drawing, under its Blocks table. And in here, I have a bunch of useful things that I can use in a title block. I can use this drawing title. I'll insert this block, and I'll say OK here, and I'll place it right down here. And we also have a graphic scale, I believe we could use. Insert block. I'll put that in as well. Okay, so these objects are coming in on whatever the layer was when I inserted them, and they're on the dimensions layer. I'm going to change that and place these on the title block layer. And I'll just move this up, turn off ortho, and I'll place that just underneath the building like that. And this is also an attributed block. I'll double click on it, and you can see that we have the enhanced attribute editor. And so here we can adjust these different parameters. Alternatively, I could type in ATE, enter, and click on this, and I'd get this other interface. So let's say that this scale is not 1:1. In this case, it's a 1/2 inch equals 1 foot, 0 inches. And the title will be condo floor plan. And the drawing number is number 1 on this sheet. And this is a dynamic block that has a grip on it that allows you to adjust the width of your call out here. And then this is the graphic scale, and it's a dynamic block that has this visibility grip. And maybe this is a little confusing, but in 1/2 inch scale, 1/2 inch equals 1 foot. So 1 inch would be 2 feet, and that changes the values on this graphic scale. So if we held up an architectural scale to the drawing, we could measure using this as our legend scale unit. Great. So now I have added some additional details to this sheet. Now, I don't want to save it with the same name because I've done a lot of work on this. I'm going to save as and call this something different. I'm going to call it title block. I'm going to call it smart title block in layout. Save. And if I want to reuse this in the future for other drawings, it might be convenient to save this as a template. But of course, if it is a template, I wouldn't want to have this specific geometry from this condo here. So I'm going to select that and delete it. And it's still actually part of the drawing. So I'll use purge. And I need to get rid of that specific condo floor plan block here and purge that item. Now it's truly gone. And so I have nothing in model space. I'll set my current layer to be layer 0. I still have all the layers that we had in the condo floor plan, which may or may not be a good thing. You can decide whether you want to purge those as well. And then we have a layout tab here, A101, and I don't need these dimensions. I'll delete those. But I do want to leave these blocks, which will be useful in the future. So then I can save this as, I'll change the type to a drawing template. And I'll go under AutoCAD templates here, and I'll call it my custom smart title block and save that so that in the future, if I were to create a new drawing, I'm going to be prompted to select a template to create that with. And I'll select this template. And now in my new drawing, I have all of this ready to go. I can just edit this to suit the needs of my new drawing. And I can put all of my work in model space. So there you have it.
So that was all about making a smart title block in AutoCAD right from scratch. If you are completely new to AutoCAD and you want to learn it right from scratch, for free, then sign up for the AutoCAD Essentials course using link in the description and also in the pinned comment. After finishing the course, you'll also get a certificate of completion from SourceCAD, which you can mention on your CV, and you can also add it to your LinkedIn profile. Also, let me know in the comments down below which topic you want to see in the next video. I'll see you soon with another one. Take care.